Hello and welcome on in everybody. I am your host, Sam Peterson, and welcome into the Photoshop challenge for today. Today we're going to be creating an alien eye. So we're kind of going pretty sci-fi with it, and this is kind of an illustrative challenge. I always like to fit one of these in. So let me show you what that's going to look like. I have this base file, and if you want to download this, definitely check the link in the description below to get the starter file that has all the resources that you're going to need for this challenge. So what the challenge looks like, we're creating something a little bit like this, getting kind of ambitious. I'm going to show you how to create an eye, and then we're going to kind of create an alien eye based off that design. So let's jump right into it because there's a lot to do for today's challenge. So first off, I just want to create a highlight layer here. And for the highlight layer, we're going to create a new layer with Control or Command Shift N. I'll name this highlight. We're going to have a lot of layers, so it's really good to name these off the bat to avoid confusion. I'm going to pick the elliptical marquee tool here over on the top left of the toolbar. And I'm not going to hold on shift to keep it a circle. I actually want to get this sort of oval, and I'm holding on spacebar while I'm dragging it out to reposition it. I want to give a little gap from the top, but I think that looks pretty good right there. So I'm going to let go. I'm going to press G for my fill bucket tool, and I'm going to fill that in with white. So from here, I'm going to do Control or Command D to deselect, and I want to give this kind of an arc shape. So I'm going to get my polygonal lasso tool, and I'm going to select, kind of cut off the edges at an angle here. You can just click around it, hold on shift to add to my selection, try to make that sort of symmetrical. Try that again. Doesn't need to be perfect, but something like that. Press delete. I think that looks okay. I'm going to use my elliptical marquee tool yet again, and I'm going to drag it up near the bottom to kind of get this arced bottom, but I still want it to be not too arced. I just don't want it to be flat, so I may flatten it out a bit, do something like that. Now I can always adjust this if I want to further. With the elliptical marquee tool. I'm sorry, the polygonal lasso tool. Basically just carving it and cutting it until I have a shape that I'm satisfied with. It's kind of a nice arcing shape that sort of fits the feeling and form of the shape of this sphere. And we'll call that good enough. I may actually warp this into place. It looks a little off. You can go into Edit, Transform, Warp for that if you want to. Something like that looks good enough. Edit, transform, warp. So from here, what I want to do is I want to mask out this glare a little bit to make it more realistic. So I'm going to click this mask button at the bottom of the layers panel, the little rectangle. We're going to go into our brush, and we're going to get a soft round brush. Just the default soft round brush. I'm going to crank down my flow quite a bit. Whenever I use the brush with the mouse, I lower the flow quite a bit, and I use a large brush size. I think that looks good. Maybe I'll soften the edge, give it a click or two. Just kind of get this nice faded look. But we have a mask, so we can always adjust this and bring it back if need be. Might want to warp this a little bit more too. Perfectionist in me is having a problem with this. So from here, what I want to do is I want to take down the opacity just a little bit. We'll put it maybe around 75%. I think that looks pretty good. And from here, what I want to do is I want to create a glare layer. So I'm just going to type in glare. I'm going to control click our sphere layer, which will give us the sphere's selection. I'm going to go back, make sure my glare layer is selected, and I'm going to fill it in with white as well. I'm going to go ahead and drag that below my highlight layer, hide the highlight layer so it doesn't get in our way. And I'm going to select the elliptical marquee tool again, and do a similar selection to delete out the center of this. I'm going to leave a gap at the top. We want a gap all around the edges, and maybe have it go down 2/3 of the way. Something like that looks pretty good, I think. And I'll just delete the center out. From here, we can mask that as well. Get back to our soft round brush, and I want to just soften the edges around the center. This seam around the center, I don't want it to disappear, but I just want to soften it a bit and keep it most prominent. around the edges. Actually, it might be easier if we lower the opacity first to the effect that it's going to be. So I'm going to take this to around 30% opacity, and that allows us to see it, how it's going to appear in a little bit more of a finished way. So I want to kind of ease off the bottom a bit. I lost too much of that seam, so I can click back, lower my my flow even more if I need to. Maybe click back a couple times. And I think that's starting to shape up. I also want to kind of mask out the core shadow. The core shadow is this darkest spot between the reflected light and the main light source. So I might just do kind of a little bit of a brush stroke right there. I think that looks pretty good. Now, when we hit that with the highlight layer, we have the glare layer on its own and the highlight, we get kind of a nice sheen effect. And sometimes you have to like toggle these on and off. Sometimes your eyes just sees it graphically, but it should have this nice sheen effect to it. So what I want to do from here is create the pupil. So I'm going to do Control or Command Shift P, or sorry, Shift N, and then type in pupil. And then I'm going to go ahead and actually drag out some guides here. So I want to select my sphere layer, and then drag out some guides. Now, let me try that again. I think I might have to hit V for the move tool and then Control H. Sometimes I hide my guides, so if they're hidden, sometimes Control H will fix that. But if you drag out from the rulers, and if your rulers aren't on, you can do Control or Command R. Then you can drag out from the side. I'm going to do it for both horizontal and vertical, and it should snap. If it doesn't snap, make sure you go into View, Snap is checked on, and Snap to Guides is checked on. So that looks pretty good. What I want to do is create this pupil with the elliptical marquee tool. You could use a shape tool. I just like to use my selection tools, and I'm going to hold on Shift to keep it a circle. I think the size of that looks pretty good. I'm going to fill this in with an off black. It's not going to be fully black, but something just above black. I'm going to duplicate that with Control or Command J. This is going to be our iris. I'm going to select a color similar to the eyeball, actually, but we'll adjust this shortly. And I'm going to hold on Alt to drag this out. Now, I actually think I have a hex code for the color I wanted to use for this, so I might just throw that in there. Press Enter to confirm. And the hex code is B36B38. And there's a little bit brighter of an orange color. I'm going to bring that down below the pupil. I'll call it iris. Again, we're going to have a lot of layers, so it's good to keep track of this stuff. And I might just scale that up a bit more. Again, holding on Alt or Option to keep it scaling from the center. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's see. What I want to do from here is change the color of the eyeball itself because it's competing with my iris. You can use any eyeball color you want for these. We're kind of doing a human one first, but I'm going to go into Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Hue and Saturation, right-click that to create clipping mask to clip it to the sphere, which we could just call eyeball too. And I'm just going to desaturate it. I'll probably keep the hue the same, but I might want to desaturate it down to like 50. Just for a more neutral color, and we can adjust this later as well. And what I want to do here is I want to group some of these layers. We're getting a lot of layers. It's always good to group. So I'm going to select my highlight and glare, Control G, or sorry, Control or Command G, and then call it highlights. I want to bring that above my pupil and iris layer. I want to grab my pupil and iris, Control or Command G, group it, and do iris and pupil. So now we have all these nicely organized. We have our glare layer on top, and then we have our iris and pupil below that. So from here, I'm going to turn the glare and the iris and pupil off. I can hide my guides with Control or Command H. And then from here, what I want to do is I actually want to create a new layer. We'll just call this overlay texture. And I wanted to show you how you can do a little texture with the overlay layer. I have this messy brush, and I could actually link this in the Discord after. But what I want to do is actually select the value with Alt or Option of our eyeball. I want to desaturate it almost all the way, and then you can kind of get some cool texture if you deviate from that value just a little bit. Go a little bit brighter for the brighter tones. The brighter you get, the more it's going to deviate from the values that we have established. So I'm kind of working within this range. I can darken it down just a bit. Again, I'm desaturating because overlay gets saturated really, really quick, and I don't want that effect. But you can see as you work within this middle range, I'm just clicking around. You can lower your flow too. We can get some nice sort of organic texture. It's subtle. You can go more overt by deviating from the value more. I'm going to right click that, do create clipping mask. See how it just adds a bit of texture within the values that we already have established. So one more thing I might do is go into my levels, new adjustment layer, and levels here to make a levels adjustment. Right click that, flip it to our sphere like everything else, and just crank up the brightness. I might boost the darkness a bit to keep that value range. We don't want to blow it out. See if I still have that nice roundness to it. I think that looks pretty good. Let's turn our pupils and glare layer on. I think that looks pretty good. That levels adjustment, you can see how that affected it. I think that looks pretty good. And yeah, the next is to add a little bit of shading to the iris and pupil to make it fit in with the rest. But first, I want to say hey to everyone. Good to see you. What's going on, Sean, Carol, Stoney, Afrosia, Robert, Frank. I saw everyone in here. We got Daniel Human. What's going on? Samantha, General Kenobi. We missed you yesterday. What's up, Apurva, Jennifer, everybody. Rob as well. So I just want to remind everyone that on this Friday, we have a review stream. So if you guys have any questions or anything you want me to elaborate on, keep those questions in mind. Shoot them to me on Discord. If you want, I can make a note of them and we can review things and, chat on Friday. What's going on, Adari? So next I want to get into this, the shading for the pupil and the iris. So what we're going to do is we group the pupil and iris here, and I want to create a multiply layer. So I'm going to do Control or Command Shift N, the hotkey for a new layer. I'll just call this multiply and set the blending mode to multiply. Now this is on top of our iris and pupil group. I'm going to right click it, create clipping mask. I'm going to once again grab my airbrush, soft round brush, and I'm going to select kind of a 1/3 up the value range, very desaturated, bluish purple color. This is often what I choose for my shadows. I'm going to change my flow down. It's way too high. I use a very, very big brush for shading, typically. Low flow, big brush is always my trick. And I'm just going to drag it across the eye. I'm going to go a little bit darker. I want to boost the shadow at the bottom. And we're essentially, if I turn off the highlights, and I recommend you do, it's easier to see, you can kind of get a nice gradient from dark to light across this. Again, stick with the biggest brush you can. Just make these large swipes for clean, smooth gradients. You could also use the gradient tool if you're more comfortable with that. So now that matches our eyeballs form a little bit more. You can also create another one. I'll do multiply 2. Because sometimes I've noticed from the reference, and I shared these references, by the way, in the Discord. So there's a million different crazy looking eyes out there in nature. Definitely recommend checking it out. But I posted some here that are really cool variety because we're going to be kind of using that as a reference today with our eyes. So I might want to darken around, right click that second multiply layer, clip it, and got to set the blending mode to multiply. It's looking a little off. All right, let's try that again. Go a little bit lighter. I don't want the darkness so dramatic, but I can just kind of darken around the edge out here. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's see. So we got that. Oh yeah, so what I want to do from here is maybe add a little drop down or a drop shadow, sorry, to the iris. Open that up, double click the iris, and you can also do drop shadow, which gives it a little soft edge around the side. I think it adds some realism too. I have it set to multiply on a dark purple color, 34 opacity, 1 spread, 50 size, 0 distance. It's a very subtle effect, but I think it kind of helps with this one too, the kind of outer edge. So from here, what I want to do is I actually want to mask the pupil and iris. So I'm going to go ahead and create a mask for both of them. We'll do the iris first, and I'm going to get that messy brush. And again, if you guys like this brush, use any textured brush you like. But let me change my flow to be a bit higher, maybe 50. But if you do like this brush, I can always share it, my brush set in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spend a little bit of time masking this out here. And what we're doing is we're just softening the edge. If you look at those references, there's not a super hard edge on the iris and pupil all the time. I'm going to create a mask for this one too, just at the bottom of the layers panel. Make sure you're in the mask and that you're using black to conceal, and then you can bring it back with white. I always say the rhyme I think I got from Jesus, black conceals, white reveals. Good way to remember it. But you get some flexibility with these masks. Some cool texture with these brushes. So I think that looks pretty good. From here, what I want to do is, let's see. Oh yeah, so next here I was going to give the iris some detail. So we're going to create a new layer on top of the iris specifically. Control or Command Shift N. We'll just call this painting, because this is where you can kind of get creative. And I'm going to create a clipping mask. Right click that painting layer, clip it to the iris. I'm going to turn off my shading layers. And from here you can kind of just have fun and paint. Again, use textured brushes, use low flow, whatever you want, but we can use the symmetry tool. If I turn on my guides and I turn on vertical symmetry, we can actually click and snap that into place. Press Enter to confirm the symmetry tool. In order to access the symmetry tool panel, you need to have the brush, but there's a circle one you could use. There's radial, there's vertical. I'll use vertical right now, but what I can do is kind of just get like a darker color and just kind of create a cool effect here. Something like this. You can spend as long as you want doing this. I'm color picking with Alter Option if I want to select colors on my canvas already. But you can get a lot of neat effects spending, as much time as you want. So I recommend having fun with these parts. So we'll leave it at that. And then if I put my shadows back on, I think that actually looks pretty cool. I'm going to do Control or Command H to hide my guides. And I can turn on my highlights, and you can kind of see how it all comes together. So what I want to do is call this done. I think this is our human eye. I went over some different techniques. You can spend a long time painting that iris. I don't want to spend too long so we have time for our alien eye, but that's a lot of where like the cool texture and patterns come from. So spend as long as you need to on this stage where you're just painting, adding textures, using textured brushes. Kyle has some great special effects brushes, all that stuff. So what I want to do is I want to group all this, all the way from my highlights down to my sphere. I'm going to shift click, Command G, and we're going to call this human eye. I'm going to do Control or Command J to duplicate it, hide my human eye layer, call this new layer alien eye. So from here, I'm going to drop down so I can reveal everything, and we're going to change some things. I'm going to delete my multiply layers. So I'm going to click that, go down here, and I want to keep all my adjustment layers for my eyeball. So everything that's clipped to the sphere, I'm going to leave. So I'm going to shift click the iris. So we delete the iris, pupil, and the multiply layers for them. So this is what we're left with. Let's see. All right, so what I want to do next is I want to create a pupil for this alien eye. Control or Command Shift N, we'll do pupil. And you can use the symmetry tool again. We actually have it up already, I believe. Again, if you don't know how to get it up, go to your brush, click this little butterfly icon at the top, and you'll see vertical. And I think that's what we want to use for this particular effect. So I'm going to select that off black again. And here we go. Now you can create any shape you want. I have my little reference here for my alien eye. But again, find references. There's really cool stuff like this. I'm kind of mimicking this one here, the blue outer edge with the yellow eye. I think that's kind of a cool effect. But again, have fun with it. Be creative because, we're creating alien pupils here. So you can kind of do whatever shapes you want. But it's always good to be like inspired by nature because there's a lot of crazy stuff out there. In addition to painting, you can actually kind of be subtractive with it. So if you select a round brush and you make sure it's a hard eraser, if you select your eraser and you make sure it's a hard round, you can kind of subtract from these shapes too, which can give you some really interesting effects. So I think that looks pretty cool. What I could do is soften this as well. If I create a new layer, Control or Command Shift N, I'll call it pupil texture, and I'll bring this below my pupil layer. So from here, I might want to select my messy brush again. I use this brush a lot lately. And you could kind of go in, zoom in, and follow the edge with it. So we still have that cool shape we created because the graphic shape is very, very important. It's all about simplifying these graphic shapes. But I could kind of like trace along the edge and just allow the texture brush to sort of do its thing and fill in for a little bit more of an organic look. So I think that looks pretty neat right there. And again, the highlight layer adds a lot to it. See how it doesn't look nearly as realistic? Those first two layers with the highlight and the glare add everything to this effect. Also, you can hide your symmetry. If you go to hide symmetry, go to the little butterfly icon. It's still there, but it's just hidden, which is helpful. So I'm going to turn those highlights back on. And what we can do here is we can actually change the color of the eyeball itself. We're not using an iris in this, but I do want a different eye color. So we already have our hue and saturation layer because we duplicated it from the last one. So I'm going to double click that and I'm going to change this. I'm going to change the saturation to much more saturated. So maybe like -7 instead of -50. And then I want it kind of a yellow color. So I might go up to like 10. +10, and we get this kind of cool yellow color. Lightness I'll leave as is. I think that looks pretty good. Then what we can do from here is we can actually go on top of the eyeball, but under the pupils, we can do a multiply layer. So this is going to be our texture. I can call it multiply texture. Select the blending mode as multiply. And from here, what I might want to do is try out a different symmetry. I might want to try radial symmetry. Segment count, you can put whatever you want. We'll leave it at 5. Keep in mind, these ones do have a bit of intensity to them. Like the further you get from the center and the more segments you have, the more system intensive it can get. So just a warning. But I want to see my guides again. So I'm pressing Control or Command J to reveal them. I'm going to do radial symmetry again. Let's see if I can snap it to the center. There we go. Press Enter to confirm. B for my brush tool. And Control H to hide that. I could also go here and hide my symmetry, but I'll leave it. And what I want to do is kind of select maybe like a cool red color. Not cool as in temperature, but neat looking red color. And I want to turn my flow way down. It's at 80. I want it to be closer to, I don't know, 10, 20, somewhere in that range. Try that. And what I didn't do is I didn't clip this to my eyeball. So I want to right click that and do create clipping mask. And you can kind of just have fun creating patterns. You can do whatever texture you want. You don't need to follow along with these. But there's some really kind of neat looks you can get with these pattern, or sorry, these symmetry tools, I mean to say. So maybe I want it to be a bit more overt in the center here as it comes off. Just reinforce those lines. Maybe some around the outside. Could always ease off this with a soft brush if you want. Again, spend as long as you need on these. I'm kind of flying through this because I'm trying to cover so much in today's stream. But this is the part where you can really get creative. So spend as long as you need for your design. We just used a multiply layer for texture. I want to show you one more. We'll do an overlay layer. We'll do overlay texture. And this one, instead of getting darker, we can get a little bit lighter with it. So I'm going to get rid of the highlights. It's making it kind of hard to see. I'm going to get rid of the multiply as well, just so you can see this. But what we can do is we could use that messy brush we have, and I can desaturate this and use like a brighter tone. I'm going to actually use a bigger brush too. Right click that layer, clip it, because we're going outside. And you can get some really cool like texture variation with this. Try different colors. You can kind of play around. But I like the sort of texture variation you can get with this too. We can turn our symmetry off. You can clean it up by erasing some of that out if you don't like it. I would probably erase it out of the shadows. We're not going to get as much of that information and texture in the shadows. You typically see more of that in the highlights. But put all that together, the highlight layer back on, and we got a cool looking alien eye. The last thing I might want to do is actually crank up my glare. It's at 30%, but I want to put it at maybe like 40%, 50%, just enough so we can see that edge a bit more. The brighter you go, the more it's kind of lost. So maybe 40% looks good for this eye. So that's the alien eye. We also have the human eye. Hopefully this gave you some good techniques to work with. I do have to run. A reminder to join the Discord. Check it out. We got a lot of great entries here. And I will see you all next time for another challenge. Thanks, everybody.